It's amazing how one simple dream can turn into this big puzzle just waiting to be solved. And you sent us this video where somebody's analyzing their dream through like a spiritual lens. I gotta say, it's really got me thinking. We're talking about like iced coffee sabotage,
Yeah.
a rich aunt with expensive tastes, and tons of biblical symbolism. It's definitely piqued my interest, and I am so ready to dive into this unique way of looking at dreams with you today.
Yeah, it's so fascinating how this person making this video connects like these really normal things to these deep spiritual ideas. It really shows how personal dream interpretation can be and how much our beliefs change, how we understand these subconscious stories.
Yeah, it's like they're speaking a secret language,
Yeah.
decoding symbols with this special key. But before we get too lost in the symbolism, let's take a step back and make sure we're all on the same page. Can you walk us through the main events of the dream itself?
Sure. So the dream starts with the dreamer working at this fast food place. It's like a McDonald's. They get an iced coffee, but then they find out it's been messed with, like someone put hair in it. And this contamination becomes a big deal in the interpretation.
Okay, contaminated iced coffee, not how I'd want to start my day, even in a dream. Where did the dream go after that?
Well, the scene changes too. The dreamer's aunt's house, this aunt. She's portrayed as pretty wealthy, with all these things that impress the dreamer's friends. But one thing that really stands out is this perfume that the aunt specifically says cost $400. Like, she makes sure you know it was expensive. And this focus on money seems to clash later when we see these ideas about spiritual stuff.
That is interesting. You have this juxtaposition of material things, and then we're going to see spiritual themes coming in. What happens with the dreamer and the aunt? Is there any kind of, like, interaction between them?
No.
Or tension?
Yeah, they do interact. And the aunt is shown as someone who has this complicated relationship with both money and spirituality. She brags about how much the perfume cost, which seems to bother the dreamer. Later on, she also becomes this figure who, like, exposes ungodly elements, which suggests that maybe she's struggling with her own beliefs.
Okay, so there's some tension there for sure. It's not just about the fancy perfume. It's more like a clash of values, maybe. What happens next?
Well, the dreamer decides to leave the aunt's house, and as they're walking out, they start singing a religious song. And then the dreamer's sister joins in, which becomes a symbol of their strong relationship, probably because of their shared faith.
Sounds like a really powerful moment of choosing your own way and finding comfort in faith and family. I'm curious, how does the aunt react to all this?
Well, as the dreamer and sister are leaving, the aunt just says, "Good job." It seems simple, but there are a lot of ways to interpret it. The video creator sees it as affirmation of the dreamer's spiritual journey and their strength. But you could also see it as like more uncertain. Maybe there's a little bit of judgment there, or even like a little passive aggressiveness.
That's a good point. It could be genuine support, or it could just be the aunt's own struggles coming through. Okay, so we've set the scene with the main parts of the dream. Now let's unpack some of these symbols and see how the video creator interprets them. Through this like spiritual perspective, let's start with the iced coffee. What's so important about it in this dream world?
So the iced coffee, especially the waiting for it and then finding out it's been messed with, it's supposed to represent the dreamer's relationship with their faith. The creator of the video suggests that the iced coffee is like waiting on the Lord.
So the iced coffee isn't just a drink. It's more like a symbol for spiritual longing or waiting. What about the ice? Does that have any special meaning to it?
Yeah. The ice is interpreted as like the challenges and frustrations that can come with waiting. You know how sometimes waiting for fulfillment or connection can be like slow and difficult, almost like the ice is making it harder to enjoy the coffee.
I see. So even in dreams, patience is a virtue. But we can't forget about the hair in the coffee. That's not just an accident. It's like someone did that on purpose.
Yeah.
How does the video creator see that?
Well, the fact that the coffee's been messed with, especially with hair, it's interpreted as like people trying to mess up the dreamer's spiritual path. The video calls them destiny thieves to describe these people or things that might be trying to steal the dreamer's glory or stop them from reaching their full potential.
Destiny thieves. That's a new one for me. Can you tell us a bit more about that idea? Where does it come from? What does it usually mean?
Right. Well, I know it sounds a bit dramatic, but it basically means that sometimes, people or even situations can get in the way of our progress or try to keep us from becoming our best selves. And in this case, it's being used in the context of spirituality. Like, there might be things trying to stop the dreamer from connecting with their faith.
So it's not about stealing actual things, but more about the negativity and obstacles. That can block our spiritual growth. That makes sense. I also noticed the video connects the coffee cup itself to a specific verse in the Bible. Can you tell us more about that and what it tells us about the dream's meaning?
Oh, absolutely. The video connects the coffee cup to a verse that talks about being ready to suffer for your beliefs, even being willing to drink from the same cup of suffering as Jesus. It's a really powerful image. That takes the iced coffee from just a drink to a symbol of strength and resilience.
So the iced coffee isn't just about waiting. It's also about being willing to go through hardship for your faith. Pretty deep meaning for a simple object. Let's move on to another key symbol, the $400 bottle of perfume. That seems like a strong image, especially with the ant making sure. To point out how much it cost, how did the video creator approach that symbol?
Well, the video uses passages from the Bible that talk about perfume as like a symbol of arrogance or vanity, focusing on how things look instead of real spirituality. So in this case, the expensive perfume is supposed to represent materialism and the temptation to care more about worldly possessions than spiritual growth. This ties back to the tension we see between the ant's wealth and the dreamer wanting something more meaningful.
It's interesting how an object that's usually seen as beautiful and luxurious can mean something totally different. In this spiritual context, it's not that the perfume itself is bad. It's more about what it represents and the values it seems to stand for in the dream.
Exactly. It's about what the perfume represents, that conflict between superficiality and genuine faith. We're seeing some recurring themes here, like the tension between material wealth and spiritual fulfillment, and the idea of facing challenges and overcoming obstacles on a spiritual journey. It's all starting to come together into a pretty compelling story.
It really is. We've talked about the iced coffee and the perfume, but there's another thing that caught my eye. The plate of warm food. It seems like the opposite of the cold, contaminated iced coffee. How does the video interpret that?
The plate of warm food, it's meant to represent the Word of God and the the nourishment the dreamer gets from their faith. It's shown as looking cold at first, but then it's warm when they touch it, which suggests, a rekindling of their connection.
To their spirituality. I see. It's like they felt distant at first, or doubtful maybe, but then they felt that connection again, that warmth. That's a really nice image. And it kind of ties into the whole theme of warmth we've been seeing, from the warm food to their relationship with their sister getting stronger. It makes me wonder if warmth could symbolize like the dreamer's overall spiritual well-being.
Yeah.
And feeling like they belong.
That's a good point. It's really interesting how these little details can have so much meaning and connect to the bigger themes in the dream.
Okay, so while this whole interpretation is really focused on the Bible, I'm curious, what if we looked at it from like a psychological perspective too? What do you think a psychologist would say about the contaminated coffee or the ant being obsessed with the expensive perfume?
Oh, for sure. A psychologist would definitely look at those things differently. They'd probably focus more on the dreamer's emotions and any subconscious anxieties they might have. For example, the messed up iced coffee could represent feeling powerless, or like someone's violating their boundaries. It might suggest that the dreamer feels like their needs aren't being met, or that someone's sabotaging them in their real life.
That makes sense. What about the ant and her fixation on material things? Could that be seen as something else besides just a contrast to spirituality?
Yeah, a psychologist might see it as the aunt's own insecurities or her need for validation from others. It could be that she's using material wealth to fill a void in her life or to make up for a lack of emotional fulfillment.
So the ant isn't just a bad guy or a symbol of materialism.
Right.
He's more like a complex person dealing with her own stuff. It adds a whole new layer to the dream, don't you think?
It does, and it shows how dreams can reflect the complicated nature of our relationships and all the baggage we carry, both consciously and unconsciously.
It's really interesting how the same dream can be interpreted in such different ways. Depending on how you look at it, it makes you realize just how layered and nuanced dream symbols can be. But before we go too deep into psychology, I want to go back to the video creator's approach, especially how they use biblical references to guide their interpretation. Is that like a common thing in dream analysis?
Yeah, it's definitely common. In communities where faith is important, many religions have traditions and texts that offer guidings on interpreting dreams. For example, in Islam, dreams are often seen as messages from God, and they're interpreted through the lens of the Quran and Hadith.
So it's not just about finding this universal dream symbol dictionary. It's more about applying your own cultural and spiritual knowledge to make sense of things. It's like having your own decoder ring, shaped by your beliefs and experiences.
Exactly. Interpreting dreams is really personal. It's influenced by our experiences, our beliefs, and the way we understand the world around us.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little and talk about dream interpretation itself. What do you think about using religious texts or spiritual frameworks to interpret dreams? Do you think there's value in that?
I think it can be helpful for personal reflection and
Yeah.
spiritual growth. It can help us connect our inner experiences to our beliefs and values and find meaning in things that might otherwise seem confusing or random. It can also be comforting, especially when you're dealing with dreams that are difficult or upsetting.
That makes sense. But I imagine it could also be tricky,
Right.
right? Like if you're not careful, you might end up putting your own biases or interpretations onto the dream instead of letting it speak for itself.
Yeah, that's a valid point. I think it's important to approach dream interpretation with humility and openness. And remember that our understanding is always limited and changing. There's no one right way to interpret a dream, and different interpretations can all be true and offer valuable insights.
So it's not about finding the one definitive answer, but exploring different ideas and seeing what feels right to you.
Exactly. It's about having a conversation with your subconscious, using these symbolic stories as a starting point for self-discovery and growth.
So we've talked about the dream, the symbols, the
Mhm.
spiritual and psychological views, but I still have this one question. What does it all mean for the dreamer? What are they supposed to do with these interpretations?
That's a really good question. And honestly, only the dreamer can really answer that. But I think just the act of interpreting the dream can be really powerful. It can help the dreamer understand their subconscious fears, their desires,
Hmm.
and their goals. It can also give them insights into their relationships and their spiritual path.
So it's not just about finding answers. It's more about asking better questions
Mm-hmm.
and using the dream as a way to learn more about yourself and grow as a person.
Yeah, exactly. It's about embracing the mystery and the ambiguity of dreams and letting them challenge our assumptions and help us understand ourselves and the world around us better.
Okay, so we've gone pretty deep into this particular dream and its interpretation, but I want to bring it back to our listeners for a minute. You've been with us on this journey, listening to the dream, hearing the interpretations, and thinking about different perspectives. What's going on in your head right now? What parts really stand out to you? What makes you think, wow, that's deep? Or, I need to think about that more.
Maybe you're remembering some of your own vivid dreams and wondering if they have hidden messages too. Or maybe you're thinking about the role of faith and spirituality in your life and how your beliefs might shape the way you see the world.
And it's not just about religion, right? It's
Yeah.
about any framework that helps you make sense of things. It could be your culture, your family history, your values, all your unique experiences.
Yeah.
They all shape how you see the world and how you interpret the symbols that appear in your dreams.
Exactly. We all have these lenses that we use to see and understand life. And dreams give us a peek into how those lenses are shaping our understanding of ourselves and the world. They provide a unique window into our subconscious minds, showing us patterns, fears, desires, and aspirations that we might not even be aware of.
All right, so before we wrap up this deep dive into the world of dream interpretation, I want to leave you with one last question, something to really think about. We've looked at the spiritual and psychological perspectives. But what if we took this same dream and analyzed it through a totally different lens, not religious or psychological, but artistic?
Oh, wow. That's a really cool idea. Thinking about the dream like it's a work of art with its own symbols and metaphors and emotions, you know? I wonder what we'd find.
Yeah. What if the messed up iced coffee wasn't about betrayal or spiritual blocks, but more like a statement about the bitterness of unmet expectations or feeling creatively stifled? And what if the ant's expensive perfume, instead of representing materialism, became a symbol of the temporary nature of beauty and the desire to cling to youth and vitality?
Yeah, and imagine leaving the aunt's house and singing that religious song. What if that wasn't just about faith, but about expressing individuality and having the courage to break free from what society expects? There are so many possibilities when you start looking at the dream through an artistic lens.
It's like the dream is a canvas. And we're the artists, right?
Yeah.
Adding our own interpretation
That's perspectives.
to this masterpiece. And what's so cool is none of these interpretations are necessarily wrong. They all offer a different way of understanding the dream's symbols and what's going on inside the dreamer's mind.
Exactly. It's a deeply personal journey. And there isn't just one right answer. It's all about exploring, seeing what speaks to you, and using those insights to learn more about yourself and your place in the world.
This whole deep dive has
Mhm.
really opened my eyes to the power of dreams and how many ways we can understand them. It's like we've taken this one dream and turned it into a kaleidoscope, looking at it through all these different lenses, spiritual, psychological, artistic, and each time we turn it, new patterns and colors emerge.
It reminds us that dreams are like gems with many sides. They can show us different parts of our inner world. Depending on how we look at them, they invite us to explore our subconscious, to have a conversation with our deepest fears, desires, and hopes.
And maybe the most important thing is it reminds us that we're not alone. In trying to figure out what our dreams mean, there are tons of resources and traditions and frameworks out there to help us. But in the end, the most important tools are our own intuition and willingness to explore the unknown.
I love that. Dream interpretation is a constant process of discovery and looking inward. It's a dance between the conscious and the subconscious, a journey of uncovering the mysteries inside us.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. Don't be afraid to explore your dreams, embrace the mystery, consider different perspectives, and trust your gut. You might be surprised by what you find and the amazing insights that are waiting for you.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.
And remember, the world of dreams is always open to interpretation.